Hi, Michael. Thanks again for your time and thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you. And this will be fun.
Yes. So tell us. We can't wait to hear from you. What is happening in the aerospace industry 2020 and 2021?
Sure. So I run a space sector focused venture capital fund called Starbridge Venture Capital. And we've been around since 2017, working on our second fund right now. And we invest exclusively in the space sector. So specifically space, not very much in the aero side. So we don't do things like drones or urban air mobility. We kind of stay away from those. And we are a firm made up of about 50% finance professionals, hedge fund managers, former venture capital fund managers. I came from a previous fund that I used to work for. And then the other half is space professionals, former astronauts, scientists, space company operators. I helped co-found one of the commercial lunar payload services companies back in 2004. And so we were created because we saw a gap in the market around what would traditionally be called a Series A, which is where a company has figured out their technical solution. They've raised a little bit of angel financing, and now they're ready to go raise usually between 5 to 15 million on the round that they use to actually go to market. And what was happening prior to last year was when those companies went to traditional venture capital funds, they didn't really understand the sector and they didn't understand the opportunity, and they had a real problem doing due diligence. And so there were some venture funds out there that in our opinion, they were making bad investments, and yeah, they ended up having a couple of bankruptcies, but also they were missing the good investments because they couldn't understand the opportunity. And so we created Starbridge as a way to help bridge that gap. So we invest usually once there is some indication of product market fit. So we're not really so much interested in the technology per se. It's what market opportunity have you discovered and what's the scale of that market, and solving problems using space adjacent technologies to solve problems that haven't been able to be solved before. And that's the unique problem in the space sector is we have a lot of companies being founded by engineers who are interested in having fun playing with a particular technology as opposed to actually solving a business problem.
Right.
And that's where we kind of come in and say, these companies are science projects that can never be a business. But these companies over here that you're really not paying attention to because they don't get a lot of headlines on magazine articles, these are the companies that are actually making money.
Right.
And then we double down on those. But there's a few things that we're also known for not investing in. So we do not invest in launch. When you look at where the revenue is made in the space sector, the launch market is a small sliver of about a $360 billion market. So the bulk of the revenue is actually made by the applications that fly on the rockets, not the rockets themselves. The problem is the rockets are the ones that actually get all the press. So when someone's looking at the space sector and they're looking at it in the popular press or even the financial press, it really is the rockets that get all of the clicks, and so they get all the coverage. And over the past decade, especially when SpaceX really started to hit their stride with the Falcon 9, there were a lot of companies, and when I say a lot, currently over 160 small launch vehicle companies around the world trying to do what SpaceX has already done.
Mm-hmm.
So launch
and they haven't been successful.
Some of them have, but those are the ones that started early. So Rocket Lab, Relativity, possibly Astra. They've only done one launch so far. Relativity hasn't done a launch yet. But those companies started almost 7 years ago. And so they got a big head start on a lot of the other ones. The ones that started after that are really struggling. They haven't flown. They haven't been able to raise money beyond what they need. And it's really difficult to find customers because the customers are like, yeah, these guys over here have already flown, or I can get a cheaper price on SpaceX. Why do I want to sign up with you when you haven't flown anything? I don't even know if you can do it or not. And so the market has just gotten way, way, way too crowded. As far as what we do invest in and why, we primarily right now, the most profitable parts of the sector are the same ones that we've been riffing on since the 1960s. Telecommunications and Earth observation. That's where the bulk of the profits are being made by the sector right now. But what's happening is with launch costs dropping by an order of magnitude and maybe a little bit more, that coupled with the build cost associated with building a satellite dropping also by an order of magnitude, and at the same time, the mass of a satellite that you need to build is also dropped significantly. The cost of doing something in space has dropped so much that business models that existed that people looked at even 10 years ago as not being viable are now profitable. So a perfect example is, and this is really something we've seen just over the past 2 years, you now have mobile weather app companies are able to fly their own weather radar satellites, and they don't have to go through the national weather services or the bigger players. So the revenue they make from their mobile weather application on the phone, both the app, sign up to get it out of the app store, and the ad revenue they make, they're profitable enough that they can say, I want to fly my own radar constellation and get my weather data the way I want to.
Right.
That would not have been viable even 4 years ago.
And why is that? Is it because of the technology, or is it because of regulation?
It's not really regulation now. It's the cost. The cost of flying your own constellation is, if you're flying maybe a 10 spacecraft constellation of weather radar satellites, you're looking at about $500,000 to $1 million per spacecraft. And depending on the mass, you can launch them all in one Falcon 9 transporter flights, rideshare. And that ends up being about $750,000 per spacecraft.
And the reason that the cost has significantly been reduced, is it because of the scale up in the space industry? It's not, technology does have something to do with it. We've gotten some advances in 3D printing, helps with, especially with engines, miniaturization of electronics, but really it's management practices. So this was about 6 years ago now, when SpaceX was starting to sell commercial cargo flights to NASA. The price that SpaceX was telling NASA it would charge, NASA said, according to our models, that is not possible for you to do it that cheaply. We think that you are lying. Because in the space sector, prior to that, there was a long history of big, large aerospace companies coming in and saying, oh, sure, I'll build that satellite for you for, $10 million. And then you get a little bit into the project, and then the company comes back and says, oh, no, I needed another million. Oh, I need another million.
Right.
Oh, I need one more. And so by the end of it, the project that was originally supposed to be 10 million now costs 100 million because NASA or the government agency, once they did the contract, they couldn't let it fail, so they keep adding more money to it. And so NASA thought that's what SpaceX was doing. So NASA hired the Aerospace Corporation to go in and do an audit of SpaceX's practices to find out whether or not that was what was going on. And this report's available on the internet. If you look for the Aerospace Corporation's NAFCOM model study, NAFCOM, the conclusion was SpaceX's management practices that come from the software development world, which is more agile, iterative, leaner, is inherently an order of magnitude cheaper than NASA. Not because of the technology, it's all about how they actually do what they do, the management practices. And that what the Aerospace Corporation said is if NASA was allowed to break any federal law on procurement or anything, that they would still be inherently 10 times more expensive than SpaceX on a normal day. And so that's a lot to do with it. It's standard commercial management and technology development practices applied to something that previously had been nothing but government contractors and what's called cost plus contracting. So prior to SpaceX, whenever Boeing or Lockheed or somebody would go to NASA and says, I want you to build something for me, a spacecraft or a rocket, whatever, the contract was, whatever it costs you to do this, we will pay you this percentage of profit on top of that. And now when you think about the incentives that creates, is there any incentive for that company to keep costs low? No, they're going to inflate costs everywhere. And that's what was going on. So the reason all of this is sort of new is in the US, there was a law passed in 2004 that a bunch of us worked on that clarified the ability for commercial companies to fly their own rockets for commercial customers without the government being involved. And that was the law that really allowed SpaceX to do what they're doing. It clarified who owned what in space. And so it was, prior to that, if you were trying to do this, there were just too many legal questions. But that was 2004. It really did take this long for the industry to be able to get on its feet, find the customers, convince the markets to buy. And that really is why you started seeing this happening in about 2015, 16. It was why we created Starbridge in 2017, because that was the point where this industry became finally investable.
Well, that's amazing. That's amazing. And what is the profile of companies that you have invested so far? I mean, if you can share the diversity of the products and the history.
So we start out with about 50% of the portfolio being either Earth observation or communications. And then we get into supporting services, things that enable future capabilities, supply chain management. We're looking at some companies to enable the aerospace supply chain to work better. So one of our first investments was a company called Masten Space. They do 3D printing in space. They were the first company to have a 3D printer on the space station, but they were also into building complex, large structures in space using additive manufacturing in actual space, not in space station. When we spoke to them, they were like, one of the limiting factors for our ability to grow is the International Space Station is a good platform for research, but it's a bad platform for product development and manufacturing. And we had been in touch with both Axiom Space and NanoRacks as two companies kind of focused on that capability. And we ended up investing in Axiom Space in their seed round because they start out attached to the International Space Station and the US segment. So they're building a commercial add-on
to the US segment of the space station. And they're enabling both in-space manufacturing and also human flights to the space station for various purposes. That has turned into, we had an exit in Maiden Space back in this time last year. Axiom just closed a $130 million Series B round that we participated in. And you can find the article on that investment on CNBC. Nice big round. We're also in a company called Link Global, which has figured out how to trick a cell phone into thinking that a spacecraft flying overhead at 17,000 miles per hour is a cell phone tower and can communicate to that spacecraft using any standard unmodified cell phone.
Commercial spacecraft?
It's a commercial spacecraft, yeah. They're flying their own constellation. They've got 2 up there already, and the rest of the constellation they start deploying toward the end of this year. And what they're going to be able to do is provide you cell phone coverage no matter where you're at on the planet. So you can be on a raft in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, 1,000 miles from any other human being whatsoever, and you can still pull out your phone and send your mom a text saying, "Hey mom, come rescue me. I'm stuck in the middle of the Pacific Ocean." And
global SIM card number.
Same SIM card number, same carrier, same, just like you were at home.
Great.
The reason we like that was because their contracts are actually with the mobile network operators, your cell phone companies directly. So it's not a direct consumer to play. They have a contract directly with Orange or AT&T or Sprint or whoever, and they get a subscription payment directly from them from the number of subscribers that pay into it. And so even in the US, there are parts of rural America that don't have cell phone coverage. My family lives out in the middle of nowhere in southern US, and I hit dead spots all the time. And so, yeah, that gives me the ability to stay in touch. They've gotten traction in parts of Africa, parts of Southeast Asia, other places. And that's a really interesting business for us. The other companies that we're in, there's a company called Umbra. They're building a synthetic aperture radar capability. Synthetic aperture radar, what we call SAR, SAR, was legalized for commercial use by the US government in 2016. Prior to that, it was really only something the military could use. And the nice thing about SAR is it allows you to get an image of the Earth at night because it doesn't use sunlight. And it actually sees through clouds and through the rain, because the spacecraft is actually sending a radio signal down to the Earth, and that signal bounces back off of the Earth, and that's how you get the image. You can do a lot of things with SAR, but the ability, so if you can think of an optical Earth observation company, they only see the Earth during the daytime. And you need that other half of the day data sometimes for a lot of industrial monitoring. There's a lot of issues around enforcing boundaries around protected fisheries and illegal fishing. And you want to see, is somebody sneaking over in the middle of the night when they don't think the satellites can see them doing illegal things. And so it's stuff like that SAR has a real applicability. Let's see, Link, Axiom. We're in a company called New Age Meats, which is a stem cell based vat grown meat company. So if you are going to have a lot of people living in space, you're not going to bring livestock. You're not going to bring a cow or a pig or whatever, just because the supply chain for keeping a cow alive in space is way too expensive.
And the gravity.
Right, floating cows going by. And so that was an early investment by us because we want to see how the company grows. But the same technology that you need to do to grow these stem cells in a vat in zero gravity, which they have done some research on, that same technology is licensable to biotech companies for growing drugs and things in zero gravity. So there's a lot of ancillary things that spin-offs that you can have from these companies that we like that enable future space applications. Going back to Axiom for a minute, they do enable in-space manufacturing and some of the manufacturing companies, but the habitat they're building off of the ISS is also built for human astronauts to be able to go up there and work, but also to do experiments or to just enjoy the view.
Is it on the orbit? Is it in the orbit?
Yeah, it's attached to the International Space Station, so it's in low Earth orbit.
Okay.
But it's a private facility. And so when SpaceX started flying the Crew Dragon last year, the first private spacecraft to carry crew to the space station, not long after that, Axiom announced that they had the first private crew going to the space station, and that was called AX-1. And Axiom's VP for business development is also the pilot of that mission. And it's got 3 astronauts flying up that are, 2 of them are involved. One of them is involved in a philanthropic work. He's from Israel and is being sponsored by by the Israeli government, but also an educational nonprofit. So he's going to be teaching science classes from the space station in Israel. Nice. One is from Canada and one is from the US. And Michael Lopez Alegria, who is the pilot, is originally from Argentina. And so it's a very international kind of crew. The other one is that not their second flight, but their third flight is actually what we call possibly the movie flight, because that one may end up flying Tom Cruise, his co-star, and his director up to be shooting footage for one of his upcoming movies on the International Space Station.
Right. And when this project's going to be forecasted to be finished?
That one will probably end up happening at the end of next year. So in fall, winter of 22-ish. Apparently they're having to write the script. There was no script. They decided to do it, and then they're going to write the movie around it. So
That's
I think
great.
they have to do a little bit of preliminary work. I also know that apparently Russia is also working on the same thing on the Russian segment. There's a crew in Russia that wants to fly up there and shoot a movie.
It would be so commercialized, I believe.
Yeah, both of them are commercial, and it's that's one of the things that sort of surprised us a little bit. We didn't think that the human astronaut component of Axiom's business was going to show up this fast.
Right.
But in a lot of cases, it's the demand was there. It's just wrapping the story around it, getting people to actually close the contracts. And really this started happening as soon as people saw the SpaceX crew mission fly and how much the astronauts that flew on it enjoyed the ride, that the private astronauts ended up signing the contracts. So,
well, I believe it was called business class versus the economy class that NASA or other.
Right, exactly. Yes, it's the same thing. Yeah, don't expect anybody to come by serving drinks on there, but yeah. So some of the other things that we're involved in our second fund, which is open right now, we just made an investment in a company called Orbital Sidekick. Mm-hmm. That is something called hyperspectral Earth observation. Hyperspectral is, if you're somewhat familiar with spectrometry, which is the ability, when light bounces off of some material, you can look at the light as it bounces off, and inside that there will be little spikes in the light that comes out that says the thing that light bounced off of has these elements in it. So there's some copper, there's some zinc, carbon, hydrogen, that kind of thing. With a hyperspectral satellite, it takes about an 8-meter square picture and can tell you what the spectral lines are of what it's looking at. And so what Orbital Sidekick has is the ability to see 400 spectral lines between 400 nanometers and about 2,500 nanometers, which includes the optical, but also the near and mid-wave infrared. And with that, so whereas, for example, optical, you can get a picture of what you're looking at. With OSK, you can say, not only I can see a picture of it, but I can also see what it's made out of. And once, for example, if you were to go to, this is a silly example, but
asteroid, perhaps.
Some of it's used for asteroids, but what they use for on Earth observation is identifying the things that are in the image. Right. So if I know what the paint of a 2012 Ford Focus, a car, if I know what the paint is made out of, then I can look at this image and instantly say, okay, these 5 cars are 2012 Ford Focuses because I know exactly what the paint is made out of. Right now, you have to sort of do that with optical analysis, and you're kind of guessing, and okay,
it's not accurate.
It's inaccurate, but with this, it's incredibly accurate.
Right.
And you can do some very interesting things with that. So, for example, you can look at a crop in a field and say, okay, we can tell that it's soybeans. We know what a soybean plant looks like when it doesn't have enough water. So we know that this part of your field needs some more water. But we also know what a soybean plant looks like when it has this particular disease. And you may not know it yet, but these plants over here are infected with that disease. You need to add a pesticide or an herbicide or some more fertilizer or whatever. So it allows the farmer to put exactly what they need for the plants in their field down to about an 8-meter square.
Well, that's amazing.
Yeah, and they can diagnose some of these crop diseases and malnutrition and lack of water from orbit.
Or even the historical places, perhaps, around the world, that if they are kind of like being eroded.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. You can tell whether or not a given piece of land, what nutrients the ground is missing, so you know what kind of fertilizer you need to put on there. Mm-hmm. But you can also use it to identify land that doesn't have, that you're thinking about using for agriculture, where to actually plant which specific plants because they grow better with particular nutrients that are already in the ground.
Wow, so that's amazing. Forecasting and predicting in agriculture.
And efficient use of the resources that you have. So
exactly.
It not only saves the farmer money on efficiently using their resources, but it also increases their yield at the same time.
It's precision farming.
Exactly, yeah.
That's amazing.
It's precision farming at scale because they can look at an entire country all at once. So and they do it kind of on a weekly basis. So those are
perhaps the project that Bill Gates might be interested, as he's I believe the largest landowner of the farm in the U.S.
Yes, exactly. So those are some of the applications that we like, is things that are financially viable now, return an investment that makes our investors happy with the return, and fit in the typical 10-year venture capital lifetime. But within the space sector, there are things that people are working on that don't fit venture capital. So if you're looking at companies that want to be able to do asteroid mining or developing the surface of the moon or building large human habitats in orbit, you're talking about things that will take 20 years to get to.
Right.
In the case of asteroid mining, that's more than 20 years away. Because in a lot of cases, the business model just does not close.
Right.
And so there are other financial tools that we and the rest of the industry are looking at that go beyond venture capital. So a lot of this looks like things that development banks would get into, large debt houses, for example, companies like Macquarie down in Australia, that they do a lot of very large debt deals for infrastructure like airports and seaports and canals and large things like that. Hydroelectric, they do a lot of. And there, in that case, you're looking at investment periods over 20 to 40 years. And wow. So those are a lot more debt oriented. They're structured around debt and revenue share. And I think you're going to see a lot of those kind of deals start to show up here in the next 5 to 10 years. So that's not something that we currently do, but we're out looking at those other more long-term business models and how do you make those work.
Well, that's amazing. How do you see the space economy trends? Well, as you mentioned, even like till mid 2020, the industry was not accelerating in this level as it is. And how do you predict that it actually? So how do you see it in a span of a spectrum?
So do something in the short term and then go to the long term. Right now, with the public markets the way they are, and especially with the number of SPACs that are going on in the U.S. market and U.S. stock markets, a lot of companies are getting some quick cash in the door. But this stock market is really overbought. It's way too hot. So you're going to see some, you're already seeing some retractions on pricing going on right now. Haven't checked the market in the last few minutes, but everything on my board was red earlier this morning. And so we're going to see some cooling off on some of that, but some of these SPACs do make a lot of sense. For example, the one that was announced earlier this week with Rocket Lab. $4.1 billion valuation, $475 million in permanent capital. That deal looks healthy. That's a good deal. And so we think that those are going to continue. So the companies that are actually real companies are going to be able to do that kind of thing. And access to capital is going to help. So we're going to see a lot still going on in Earth observation and communications, kind of disrupting the current players, new capabilities, new international markets. You're going to see, these things happening in South America and in Africa. India is really doing a lot of stuff in Earth observation and even communications. Companies out of there called Pixel, and they're starting to do their own communications constellations. So there's still a lot of growth in some of these existing markets. When you start looking at some of the stuff that we talk about in the sector, like, Elon's going to Mars, we're going to go extract resources from asteroids and the moon. The business models, the business cases don't really close yet because we sort of don't know who the customer is.
Right.
Because resources in space don't make any economic sense for bringing it back here, because we already have industrial capacity here that's making those resources that we get from the Earth about as cheap as you could possibly get it. And so it's very, very difficult for those in-space resources to compete. So we're looking for those customers that need those resources in space to do something. And right now, nobody needs that. Nobody's building anything in space that needs all of that capability yet. Our hunch, and this is really all it is a hunch, is that the thing that sort of justifies that is when you have a large number of people that want to go live in space and stay there or go visit. And, this is what Elon's basing all of what SpaceX is doing around, is the number of people who want to go to Mars and stay there.
Right.
And that's why he's building Starship, and why he's building even Tesla and the solar power aspects of it. And it's even why he picked methane as the propellant for Starship, because you can create methane out of the Mars atmosphere. And so following that same theme, the only thing we really see is when Elon goes to Mars, when Blue Origin starts building some of their in-space habitats they want to build eventually, those structures and those settlements will need industrial capacity to support, air and food and water and construction materials and all those kind of things. Those will start needing that industrial capacity that allows a hotel to work down here. A hotel on Earth has somebody that brings food to it. It has somebody that brings electricity to it. It doesn't do all that inside the hotel. And you're going to start seeing that same kind of infrastructure developing in space once we have those anchor customers that want to use all those resources. As far as when that will occur, my best guess for when Elon is going to be able to land the first crew on Mars is probably going to be about 10 years after the first full up flight of Starship, which we think will probably be the end of next year. Or actually, I take that back. I'll tell you after I see the SN10 flight later this afternoon. If that thing lands and it's fine, then probably 10 years after the end of this year, so 2032, will be the first people. And that's when we start seeing that inflection point for that market starting to go up.
Going up exponentially.
We think it will be exponential, but one of the problems right now we see in the industry is characterizing that human spaceflight market is very difficult. Because a lot of people who would like to be able to go don't think that they can for some reason.
Yeah, and the training, it would...
But that's the thing is you don't need the training. All the training that goes into astronauts for the National Space Station, they don't need that training. I mean, if they're a passenger, there was a plan to actually fly Stephen Hawking to the space station on a commercial tourism flight. And, he's not, all fit and in shape. And so, yeah, before he died, there was a plan to fly him up there. He flew on a zero gravity flight.
Yes. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And so, yeah, there's the three astronauts that are flying on the Axiom AX-1 flight in January of next year. One of them is in his early 80s.
Wow.
And they're reasonably fit. They're not, chronic heart failure or anything like that, but they're just normal people.
Right.
They go through a little bit of training on, what happens if there's an accident, or, how do you get out of the vehicle? How do you put on your pressure suit, that kind of stuff. There's also some training that helps them cope with motion sickness. Mm-hmm. And so that's more practice in dealing with you're now going into a new environment and how do you cope with it. But in terms of training that's necessary, that like what NASA astronauts go through, you don't need to do that.
Exactly, because they don't have to do spacewalks. They don't have to do certain missions or certain experiments.
Right.
So,
and that training is really in the technical, how do you put on a spacesuit? How do you operate the spacesuit? How do you repair these things? It's not something that involves, when you do an EVA, moving the suit around itself takes a lot of strength.
Right.
But everything else, any of us could do it. It just, how much time do you want to devote to it?
Well, that's very exciting. And how do you see the space economy growing? Um,
So there's two numbers out there that Morgan Stanley and Merrill Lynch came out with about a year and a half ago. One's based on private equity and one's based on a public equity number. And one was 3 trillion by 2040 and one was 1 trillion by 2030. When you look at the actual compound annual growth rate, the CAGR of the currently 300 to 400 billion dollar industry to that kind of number in that time frame, that's actually kind of mediocre. So we think it's going to grow faster than that, but it's going to be a little bit more. It may be a lot of different sectors. Some of it may end up happening a little bit later or a little bit earlier, depending on what the capital markets can kind of do, and whether or not really the human aspect of this kind of shows up when we expect it to. So I kind of think that the $1.5 trillion market by early 2030s, I think is very, very doable.
And the last question, what kind of like milestones are you expecting to see by the end of this year in the space economy?
By the end of this year, we expect to see both the Inspiration 1 flight, which is just a flight on Falcon 9. It doesn't go to the space station, just goes up for about 3 days and then comes back. That's a non-profit flight. A billionaire bought it, but he's giving away 3 of the other seats to, one was to the entire flight is around raising money for St. Jude Children's Hospital. Mm-hmm. And they just announced one of the participants is an employee at St. Jude. She had bone cancer when she was a young child. She's in her late 20s, early 30s, I think. And she's just an employee, and they called her up one day and said, "Do you want to go into space?" And she's like, "Yeah, why? Is this a joke?" Yeah, she signed up. The other is we're looking at a lot of developments in the Earth observation market that are creating new capabilities that have not existed before. And so we're looking at we're invested in some of the companies that are producing the data, but we're looking for the applications that then take that data and do something new and interesting with it. So companies that do precision agriculture or industrial monitoring for like oil and gas pipelines. But especially, for example, around hyperspectral, I'm looking to see sometime this year somebody to come out with novel applications for the consumer.
Right. Even
games potentially, where using hyperspectral, you can identify things, and so it's like treasure hunts. I don't know. We're very interested in people taking this technology and making it fun, do something fun and kind of unique with it. That's what we're looking for. Starlink deployment continues. A lot of people starting to gear up for that, especially lowering the latitudes where you can actually get access to the network. And especially some other countries kind of using Starlink across the country. I think Greece has signed up for Starlink and approved use. Canada. Well, yeah, especially if people in Canada are already using it. I love the fact the antenna melts the snow on top of it, and makes it usable. And a lot of use of not just Starlink, but Link and even other technologies for getting a lot of the rural parts of the world connected up to the internet and the network. And I think that's going to really enable a lot of people developing some businesses and business models that none of us have even thought of. I was on a Clubhouse room a few minutes ago with Space in Africa and the things that they're looking at to enable local populations to do a lot of really interesting things that are culturally relevant to Africa.
Right.
And yeah, I think that's one of the more fascinating things is when some of this technology and these services start percolating out into the rest of the economy, the unique things that people do with it. So those are some of the inflection points we expect to see over the next year.
Well, that's amazing. And thanks again for your time. Any recap you would like to state before we say goodbye?
I would just, yeah, the industry is growing, especially with the SPACs and things that are going on in the public markets. Do your due diligence. Dig into the deal. If there are people that are looking at investing in this sector, both private and public, spend some time learning about it. What gets headlines is often not the thing that makes the money. So we call it the investment by magazine. You can make some mistakes doing that. So it's going to be an exciting time over the next few years, but be careful with your investment dollars if you decide to participate. So, but that's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you again. Off the record, I also wanted to ask you about the Canadian space sector. What do you think of that? I know that you have like 5 minutes. And also, I believe you've heard of EarthCast.
Yes.
They're now publicly traded. So,
right.
Yeah. What do you think of? I'm just like curious to know what your opinion is.
The Canadians, the U.S. has always had a strong relationship with the Canadian Space Agency. They signed on to the Artemis Accords. They're participating in the Artemis program itself with NASA. We're an investor in a Canadian company called Illuma Power. One of our venture partners has family in Canada. We have 2 LPs, investors in our fund from Canada. Canada has some unique opportunities as well. One of the ones is the small modular nuclear reactor program for providing power to communities around the Arctic Circle. Solar power doesn't work when it's dark half the year.
But even nuclear power didn't work in Texas.
Well, yeah, but that's because there was only a few nuclear power plants and they had to deal with the transmission line.
There were 4, and none of them were like because it was so sensitive. The centrifuges were shut off.
Right, but when you are putting a small nuclear power plant in a village and these nuclear power plants are about as big as a small car.
Wow.
And they're built to serve villages of 300 to 500 people. And you just take them out to the village up around the Arctic Circle and bury them.
Right.
And
so if it is buried.
Right, it's buried. You don't have to do any maintenance to it. The only time you do maintenance is once every 20 years. And then you come up and you dig it up and you take it back to the factory and you put another one in it. And it's essentially provides power in the middle of the night. And from a space application, those are very compelling for providing power to spacecraft beyond Mars. Because once you get beyond Mars, you don't get enough solar energy to power the spacecraft. So there's a lot of interesting things that Canada, groundbreaking regulations in Canada that enables that. And they're right now leading the industry worldwide in terms of small nuclear modular reactors. And so, Canada can do some things.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Canada can do some things that the rest of the world can't. Asteroid mining technology. Canada is a leader in a lot of mining technology, especially in very, very hard to reach locations.
Barrick Gold?
Yeah, Barrick Gold. There's still gold mines in the Yukon that are still profitable if you could stay there more than 3 months out of the year.
Yeah, Canada is really good in terms of mining. You're right. And I remember a couple of years ago, there were so many protests against these mining companies and the climate change, but they were funded with few, I don't know, climate change activists, but now they're just there's no protests anymore.
Take a look at a company called Offworld AI. It's offworld.ai is the domain name. They're a mining technology company, robotic mining, but they have a space component to them. And they're getting to the point here soon where there will be no human beings in a mine.
Wow.
None.
Yeah.
And so
Yes.
you can mine year round regardless of conditions. And so, yeah, there's a lot of interesting things.
I feel bad for the, labor, the workers, but also I mean, it's efficient and it's safe.
And it's more
Sometimes.
environmental friendly because you're not removing as much material out of the mines, and it's far less damaging to the environment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's exciting. That's exciting for sure. Yes, and how about drones? You guys are investing in drone industry too?
Not really. We're in a company called AirMap, which provides geofencing for drones and airspace management for drones, because they're developing a technology for managing airspace that we think is going to be applicable to dealing with the interface between rocket launches and the rest of aviation. Because right now when a rocket launches, it's very disruptive to the rest of the aviation community in the area. Airline traffic gets routed around, like going from New York down to South America. They have to go around the entire state of Florida when there's a launch.
Right.
And that's just completely unnecessary. But AirMap has some technology for dealing with that. But generally, drones know. That said, the helicopter that was just sent to Mars is kind of interesting from a in-space reconnaissance kind of standpoint. So yeah.
Well, that's amazing. I know you have to go to your lunch time, but thanks again for your time. I'll let you know when we publish it, probably next week or so.
Okay.
And
Sounds
I'll
good.
also need where do I get your bio, the latest bio?
You can find one on our website, but I'll send you over a picture and a bio a little bit later this afternoon. You can use that one too.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Thanks. You too.
Yeah, talk to you on the Clubhouse.
Oh yeah. Yes. All right. See you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.